And no, it's not a joke. The Pentagon is set to release a report, possibly June, on UFOs that US Navy pilots have been seeing. I mean, former President Barack Obama last week said, look, this may sound odd, but it isn't.
What is true, and I'm actually being serious here, is that there's footage and records of objects in the skies that we don't know exactly what they are. We can't explain how they moved, their trajectory.
Now, what it's talking about is that for the past couple of decades, naval pilots in the US have kept seeing strange objects in the sky with them moving extremely fast. This, for instance, is from 2015 off Florida.
There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA. My gosh. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west. Look at that thing, dude.
Now, last year, the US Defense Department set up a special task force led by the Navy to detect, analyse and catalogue UAPs, which is called UFOs, that could potentially pose a threat to US national security. And a former official who did this kind of work for the US government says that is serious.
Imagine a technology that can do 600 to 700 G-forces, that can fly at 13,000 miles an hour, that it can evade radar, and that can fly through air and water and possibly space. And, oh, by the way, has no obvious signs of propulsion, no wings, no control surfaces, and yet still can defy the natural effects of Earth's gravity. That's precisely what we're seeing.
And a pilot whose squadron tracked one of these UFOs said last week this had national security implications.
I would say, the highest probability is it's a threat observation program.
Could it be Russian or Chinese technology?
I don't see why not.
Are you alarmed?
I am worried, frankly.
Joining me is Sky News US correspondent Annalise Nielsen. Annalise, I'm not wearing my tinfoil hat, but it does seem to be something out there. The question is, what?
Well, that's it. It's not a tinfoil hat discussion at the moment. That's what's got people so alarmed. But the important thing is there's a difference here in the conversation between unidentified flying objects and extraterrestrial beings. We're not saying that necessarily there's aliens ready to swarm the planet, but there's just things in the sky that they don't know what they are. And the only thing more terrifying than the government knowing something and not telling you is the government not knowing and telling you what they don't know, because this is really concerning for a lot of people that they see these objects, that they defy natural order, as you heard in that clip before. But it's also a very real chance that this is military capability from another superpower. So this is why Americans are taking this increasingly seriously. But there is a very long history in the US of obsession over UFOs. Even former President Jimmy Carter, before he became president, says he saw a UFO in the sky. Gerald Ford demanded an inquiry into it when he was a senator from Michigan. So this isn't a new obsession in America, but this has certainly reignited a lot of interest in it. And I mean, if 2020 couldn't get any weirder, why not bring UFOs in 2021?
Look, I don't know if what they're seeing is real. It's a freak of radar or infrared detection. I don't know, but they seem to think it's more than that. How much interest is there in the US about this? I was struck by the fact that they've got Barack Obama, the former president, talking about it last week. The Pentagon having a special task force that was set up last year to look at this, and you had a 60 Minutes US show on it as well. It seems to be peaking.
It does, and this isn't a new obsession, as I said before. This is kind of cyclical in America, but Barack Obama's comments are what really ignited this and kind of made it a water cooler conversation. There's plenty going on in the US right now, and I think it's a nice distraction from what's been a pretty awful year. And it's also kind of a bit symbolic of how things are returning a bit to normal now in the US. Everyone who's vaccinated here wanted to be, everyone who doesn't want to be isn't, but everything's opening up again. And so now we're kind of getting back to the normal routine of looking at other stories outside of the pandemic of the last year. So yeah, why not discuss UFOs?
Getting back to normal, discussing UFOs. Well, that's a really interesting insight into American culture. But there you go. Annalise, meanwhile, you've been studying other intruders, this time a huge surge of illegal immigrants crossing into the US from over the Mexican border. a lot from Southern America or South America. You've done some great reports for Sky News, a series of them. Tell us, first of all, the size of this wave of immigrants. How does it compare to the past?
You know what's funny is even when you mentioned that you wanted to discuss this UFO story, when I was down on the border, the language you use around this is so politicised. And so a lot of the people that I was speaking to that were really wanting to lock down on this were calling the people crossing over illegal aliens. Those who were more sympathetic to their position were calling them migrants. And so it is interesting how that all plays into this topic as well. But this is an extraordinary scene that we're seeing on the border here. 170,000 people crossed in April, another similar number in March. And that's the highest it's been in 20 years. To give you an idea, when we were going down there, we were speaking to different sources about how we make sure that we could kind of see this firsthand. And we were just being told, like, look, you're not going to miss it. And some of the people crossing over, running towards border protection that we saw, we literally came across them driving to a bar where we were interviewing the bar owner for the story that's going to run tomorrow. It was just happening everywhere. Everyone we spoke to said, oh, people come through my backyard, they were running through the swimming pool. It is prolific. And that's people's lives. These are Americans, and many of them are actually children of immigrants themselves. And so that's the discussion for the story that we have running tomorrow, the last in our series on the border, is people aren't anti-immigration, but they're just really alarmed by what's happening now.
Well, there is. I mean, these are people that America hasn't chosen as immigrants. And I also wonder whether they're genuine refugees, because from the reports you've given now, I might have missed here and there, so tell me if I got the wrong end of the stick here, but I heard a number say, look, they're fleeing domestic violence, they're fleeing a violent husband, they're fleeing poverty, sympathy, but domestic violence, fleeing domestic violence from South America all the way to America, I'm not sure that that's what you understand as a refugee.
I don't know, in my perspective, that would be about as genuine a refugee if you get in that particular circumstance.
I think you look to your own country to defend you. No, you look to your own country
Well, I mean, are you going to talk to Central American authorities to protect you in that?
It's not all go to America.
I don't know. I'm the one that had to stand there and talk to that woman, Andrew, and I would say that she's about as genuine a refugee as you would get. And even now I'm being careful with the language I use, because she was saying that her husband stalks stories about the country she's from and refugees because she's so worried that he is going to find her. He's been following her and sending messages saying, I'm basically 2 steps behind you. So, man, if I could sign off on her application, I'd be doing it in a heartbeat. But I do understand your point in that a lot of the people we spoke to were coming for economic reasons. They were saying they're just going to make more money in the US. So that's basically the US government would say absolutely not an asylum seeker. What's really influenced this has been the pandemic. There's also been 2 hurricanes that have hit Central America and really hit a lot of communities hard there, taking out a lot of central infrastructure. So that's where the Biden administration is saying, okay, we're going to give you money to build up those resources again. But it's kind of already started. People are on their way. It's on train. And once one family member goes up, others want to follow. And so this is why we thought this story was so interesting to do now, because it's not in the headlines in the US, because it's not a main story right now. It's died off, but the problem's not going anywhere. And just talk to the people on the border. They're the ones telling you that.
Annalise Nielsen, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.